If you feel like it's harder to find a job than it's ever been, you're not alone. A lot of us are looking at the job market today and saying, man, this really is a tough time to find a job. It doesn't help that companies are using banned practices in order to hire people. Things that we all agree are not okay, that we all might even think are illegal, but they're doing it them anyway. My name is Jason Roberts. I've been a recruiter for 25 years. And I'm going to show you in this video the top 3 banned practices that bad companies still use today. Stick with me. All right, before we get started, I'd love to hear from you in the comment section below. Specifically, what are you seeing companies do? What are the things that people are doing that you don't think are right? And I'll circle back with a follow-up to this with your comments, and we'll do a comments only version of this list. So please let me know if you don't hear me talk about something that you're seeing right now. That said, let's start with the number one banned practice I see people complain about is fake jobs. People who have posted what seems to be fake jobs, meaning they're jobs that are out there that you apply to and you never hear a response, and they eventually just disappear with no feedback. And you might get a response back that says, hey, you weren't hired for this gig, but that's it. That's all you hear. Fake jobs are two different things, and just about every company does it. Number one, fake jobs can be what they call pipeline jobs, meaning we hire lots of this type of person. So we're going to post a job that is out there and is posted all the time. Now, who bans this? Well, just generally people don't like that it exists, but Indeed actually is the biggest proponent of banning this. And when you see pipeline jobs, they don't actually make it to Indeed. Indeed's a very good filter of those things, and they do a good job of keeping jobs that aren't real jobs they feel like are repetitive, have been out for a long time, open. Now, these pipeline jobs, why do people use them is the next question. Well, recruiters will use them to say, I hire lots of these types of people. I want to build a pipeline of people that will be considered for when the job actually opens. So you may anticipate that a job will become available here in the next little bit, and you go ahead and open the rec in order to have a head start on filling that job when it does open up. So a terrible reason for doing it, but it feels really crappy as a candidate when you're experiencing that. The other type of thing that can feel like a fake job or not a real job is this one. The other fake job is when you apply for a job and then it just vanishes, it disappears on you. And what that typically is the recruiters left the job open for too long. So they opened up a job, they had somebody pretty far in the interview process, you stumbled upon it late in the game, and they just hadn't closed the rec out. That's a bad behavior. They shouldn't do that. What they should do is they should unpost it as soon as they have the right number of candidates. All of the applicant tracking systems do this automatically. You can set, once I have an X number of candidates, no longer accept applications for this role, unpost it. And what they're doing is they're just not using their tools the right way. So bad behavior, it's a banned practice. We all agree that they shouldn't do it. And Indeed does a good job of placing a ban on that in general. So that's the first one, fake jobs. The second one is ghosting. Ghosting is a banned behavior. Now, ghosting is typically a banned behavior even by the company itself. Their policies will say you shouldn't just ignore people. If someone applies, if they interview, if they get to a certain stage in the process, you shouldn't ignore them. But what happens with recruiters is they'll get inundated. They're overwhelmed. There's so many candidates they're dealing with that they don't get back to everybody. And they'll forget to follow up with you. And if it's not important to them, they don't tell you how you're doing or what's happening next. So not great behavior. Every recruiter ultimately does this. I've been guilty of ghosting people before. They know it's bad behavior and they shouldn't do it. But ghosting, number 2, banned behavior, everybody does. Finally, here's one that is actually illegal that many companies, especially bad companies, do. And that's hiring based on something besides the requirements in the job, meaning they're practicing discriminatory hire. Now, you'll notice every time you apply for a job, they ask you for your gender, your ethnicity. I applied for a bank job one time, a job at a big bank. It was a recruiter job, but it was at a big bank. and they ask what political party I had made my contributions to. Those things all make me feel a little queasy, right? They shouldn't have this information up front, but they all seem to collect this information up front. Believe it or not, that's actually not a bad thing. They don't share that with the recruiters. The recruiters can't see any of that information, so you're typically pretty safe with that. What tends to happen, though, is there is a benefit, and there's separate metrics that are tracked based on hiring people who are in underrepresented minorities and women. So underrepresented minorities and women, there's oftentimes a pipeline number, a percentage of the people that are presented to a hiring manager have to be from an underrepresented minority or a woman in the total slate of candidates that are presented to that hiring manager, and ultimately the total slate of candidates that are interviewed. That's oftentimes a policy. Now, what that means is they're taking something into consideration that's not on the position itself, and that in and of itself is discriminatory. So I don't love that practice. Really, I don't think anything should be taken into account when it comes to gender, ethnicity. I think that it should be strictly related to the positions. I actually had a completely off the record over a drink conversation with a very senior member of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC. And I said, so what happens now? We've had these big decisions made related to affirmative action. We've had big lawsuits that we know some large corporations are facing related to affirmative action stuff. What happens to diversity hiring practices? And the thing that he said, which I found interesting, was he said, well, you got to stop doing all the illegal stuff. What he was insinuating with that is there's been some illegal stuff, some stuff that's not okay that we've sort of let slide for a while because socially we had all agreed that this was an okay thing to do, that diversity hiring was okay to do. And it sounds like that's going to be cracked down on in the future. Now, again, very informal, and I won't even name the source on this one. So very informal conversation. So I think that one's not right. I think hiring based on anything besides the actual job and your qualifications for that job is not the right thing to do. So that is the third one. So what is there for you to do now that you know that people are using banned practices? Well, first, you should know your rights. A couple of things that you should know. One, when you're asked for a voluntary self-identification of your gender and ethnicity, you actually don't have to give that. There's always I choose not to disclose. There's no penalty for not disclosing. And honestly, there's no benefit to disclosing in real life, unless you happen to be from an underrepresented minority, or oftentimes women are helped by this, but there's not a lot of benefit to you for disclosing. So as a candidate, it doesn't help you much. It helps the company because they've got this weird quandary. They've got a tough position to be in where they're asked to collect this information in order to defend themselves, to say, oh, of the people who applied, this percentage were of one gender, this percentage were of another ethnicity. And in the end, this percentage made it through, so that they have to defend themselves to show that they're not discriminating. But in order to do that, they have to collect information that could enable them to discriminate. So, don't know what to do with that. That's our government at work, right? So we've got a weird situation. Just know that you're not required to answer any of those questions. So don't. If it doesn't help you, don't do it. The other thing to know is on fake jobs, just know where it's coming from. What I would do is I would look at the jobs and when that job was posted. If the job was posted a long time ago and there's a lot of applicants already there, just know that it's probably pretty far down the road. And unless you proactively hunt down and talk to that recruiter, there's a chance they're probably not going to look at any of the resumes that come in at this point. So I would take a look at the date the job is posted. That's my best tip for you in that case. Finally, for ghosting, here's my trick for ghosting. If you get to an interview or a phone screen, if you get to a place where someone talks to you, my trick for ghosting is always asking what the next step of the process is, when you should expect to hear from them. And what that allows you to do is you can contact them back and say, when last we spoke, you said I could expect to hear from you in 2 weeks. It's been about 2 weeks now. What's happening with my application? And it's sort of a social contract. You've asked them a question, they've given you an answer, you're following up on the answer that they gave. So what do you ask them in that interview? You make sure you ask what the process is now, so what the next step is. when you should expect to hear from them, and then how they would like for you to reach out if you need to follow up. All right. That's it. That's how you solve that ghosting problem. So we've got these 3 banned processes. We've got some solutions that you can apply in your search, and hopefully that helps you to find a job. I really hope that you have a great luck in finding that next job and finding the career that brings you tons of fulfillment. Best of luck in your search.